Welcome back, everybody. So, the day ends with Y, and that does mean that people are clowning on Ubisoft for something. It's one of those cases. It's actually a bloody fascinating topic, but it is one where I think it is important to bring some nuance and some subject area experience to it, which I guess we do have. So that's really our mission today. So here's the deal. Ubisoft is essentially developing a bit of an AI ghostwriter, okay? They are basically the latest example of, look, there's been a lot of AI news going on. The most recent has been OpenAI allowing plugins for ChatGPT. So as an example, you could just give it a video, say, hey, could you grab me like the first 20 seconds of this video? It'll process it. Boop, there's your video. You can download it. Like a lot of this pretty powerful stuff. So like with all things, technology, it is going to be applied to various different sectors. Already, I think you do find quite a few people who are using these language models, kind of like a super powerful version of something like Grammarly, because often you might say very and then something. Maybe there's a more interesting word you could use, and some of these AI models could help you find that more interesting word and become a better writer. But in this case, it is basically a ghostwriter, and I think, I pretty much had the same knee-jerk reaction to it personally of, oh god, not even, the worlds in some of these Ubisoft games are already formulaic enough and feel like they're just, you pointed an AI at the previous Ubisoft game and told it to make a new Ubisoft game. Oh dear. But there's the thing that came out on the press that got all the headlines. But the other side of that is the GDC talk. And I think it's notable that there are developers who attended the GDC talk who are saying pretty damn different things to the fiery reactionary takes that are going on. So, we're not just responding to, a few tweets or the announcement. We've also went to see what's actually being said by the people who attended the GDC talk that actually went into detail about this. So hope we're able to add a little bit more value, more value to this story for you. But basically, right, there was a press release from Ubisoft called The Convergence of AI and Creativity.
Horrible.
Yeah. As Connor's pointed out in our document here, things like this are often targeted for analysts and investors, which means that it is goddamn ghastly feeling to us as it just feels a bit ghastly, right? Anytime games are being talked about in a way that's very much like, oh, they're a commodity, we have to produce commodity efficiently. It always feels bad to us and bad to the creatives who make games as a piece of art. Now in this it says, Ghostwriter is not replacing the video game writer, but instead alleviating one of the video game writer's most laborious tasks, writing barks. Ghostwriter effectively generates first drafts of barks, phrases or sounds made by NPCs during a triggered event, which gives scriptwriters more time to polish the narrative elsewhere. So basically, it's like, imagine you're playing Assassin's Creed, whatever, you sprint through a city, the sound of, carts and traffic's there, the step of the people, the cracks and groans of, the stuff around you, but the difference is the people in the crowd can react to everything, right? They're nattering as you pass, they're, reacting as you bump into them. There's just far more of that content. So I would say take the experience of playing Oblivion, right? And I'm sure, it's one of those things with Oblivion that just gave it a beautiful clunky charm. Because it was, it was voice acted. So you would have one NPC bump into another one and be like, good day, how is it going? Yes, it is good. Have you heard about the war? I don't know. Horses. Ah, yes, I like horses too. Farewell. And then the NPCs would go. And sometimes they'd even be voiced by the same person.
Yeah, Oblivion has this enduring legacy through what can only be described as shitpost content made, with mostly Imperial Guard voice lines used repeatedly, even, remixes of them every now and again. And it's those barks that have a little bit of character that go, this is how you add the generic sort of life to your world. And that's where obviously they're like, this is important, you need these, but they're also especially when you think of a massive open world game and you need say someone's playing your game for 20-30 hours. You don't want to have the Oblivion thing of, oh yeah, I've heard that one before, oh I heard that one from someone around the corner, oh I've heard the same person say the same thing. You would want a massive amount of these to be drawn from, so you can ultimately see something unique the entire way through your play. You never hear that, oh I've heard that line before, unless it's from the same person, which would be kind of cool. But I think largely it's like, no, you need to make so much of this. Because you think of how much gameplay is repetitive and how much unique stuff you need to get through a full game of dialogue, and you go, well, yeah, but for the entire world, and you go, oh shit, that's a lot actually.
And I suppose you think about in the games that people in many cases adore the most, and one of the things they're good at doing is either avoiding or lampshading immersion breaks.
Yeah.
To take a look at the big Sony AAAs, they avoid those immersion breaks. It's funny. Whenever Last of Us Part 2 tried to be more immersive by having, you kill an NPC and another NPC goes, oh no, Brian! And it ended up it was a noble goal to make it feel dynamic, but there just wasn't quite enough to it for it to actually feel real. So instead, it felt very much like it broke the illusion a little bit. So essentially the story goes for this anyway, that Ben Swanson, who is the creator of this tool, went to the writing teams at Ubisoft, asked them what the biggest pain points in their jobs as writers in Ubisoft games were, and basically was like, okay, I want to use some of this technology to solve your biggest pain points. They said that their largest pain point was barks, essentially saying that it takes a hell of a lot of time to write barks, and they would rather be able to spend that time writing content that players would actually engage with rather than passively consume. And in a way you may think, well, just throw more writers at the problem. I think, as we all know, too many cooks, right? A big legion of writers might be useful for writing a lot of barks, but also you could end up with a game that doesn't really feel as great. So anyway, he and the R&D team at Ubisoft Forge then apparently say they went, they developed this tool called Ghostwriter. Scriptwriters first create and I suppose we actually have to, rather than, because I'll admit, the way that I saw this story was just a quick headline of, oh my god, Ubisoft are trying to replace a bunch of dialogue with an AI. This is ghastly.
Yeah, I mean, you immediately think it's cost cutting from Ubisoft. It's just them doing what we're used to AAA game companies doing. So you're like, yeah, of course, that's the response you get. That's how you're going to expect anything else, honestly.
Yeah. Now, the thing that'll actually help us understand what's really going on here is to see how the tool works, right? See, what a writer actually does. So here's what it says, right? So a scriptwriter first creates a character and a type of interaction or utterance they would like to generate. Then the ghostwriter prepares a select number of variations, and the scriptwriter can then choose and freely edit those to fit their needs. And the process uses pairwise comparison as a method of evaluation and improvement. It then provides two choices that can be compared and chosen by the scriptwriter. And once one of those choices is selected, the tool then learns from that preferred choice, and after thousands and thousands of selections made by humans, it becomes more effective and accurate. Now you might see that as so is it just going to trend towards the mean and it'll all become boring and stale? That's maybe one thing people would be a little bit worried about. The other side of it could be that it's this will get really trained to do Renaissance Italy.
Yeah.
And sound right for that. And, right. The UI then, here we have Gaspard. I was once the most talented and famous adventurer in the land. Well, that really is some Bethesda dialogue. And, you can sort of see working through some variations in that tool. So basically, it's the work of a mechanical Turk, which, don't look up Amazon Mechanical Turk. It's ghastly and dystopian and deeply unsettling. But it rephrases the text slightly and builds up a model to basically help further guide the development of, of that stuff for the game. And the thing is that the actual content, this is basically a pair programmer, right? A sort of smart buddy that ultimately a human is interfacing with. But the thing that's frustrating about this, and I guess it's one of those tricky things with GDC, because to get access to this talk, you would need to be, you need to have access to GDC Vault, and then I don't think those come out in real time.
No, not at all.
I think the idea is for it to very much incentivize going to GDC, but it's one of those things where perhaps if this was just uploaded to YouTube, then people would actually understand what it means. So to actually go through this, the press release that got everyone talking came out at the same time that the creator was giving his GDC talk, right? Talking about how it was made. And the interesting thing here is the actual ethical concerns. And I know that might sound a bit funky considering it's Ubi and, some of the staff treatment allegations and, lack of addressing employee concerns and that sort of thing. But at least for what Ben and the team and the writers have cooked up together.
Yeah, they've done a good job here, like.
Yeah. So it is actually trained on the internal work of staff. It is not scraped from the internet without consideration of ownership.
That's step one, is just, you don't want your Ubisoft game to be written by all writing ever. So it's like, here's the work, and then they're going to be better at imitating that staff and what they would do.
Yeah.
Which would obviously go, well, that sounds awful. That sounds like they'll be replaced in the long term. And that is like theoretically a fear if it gets good enough and someone goes, hang on, why do we need this person if we've got a copy of them in the machine? And you go, oh no. But in terms of like this actual tool itself, it's like, they went and talked to staff and said, okay, what would you like us to be able to make easier for you? And they're like, this. And they went, okay, we'll do that. Like, okay, it's trained on your work. Sweet, fantastic. Nothing will enter the final product without a human going, which of these options should we pick for this bark? I'll take that one. Or I'll take that one. Or even, I don't really like any of those. Keep trying until I get something I would have written there. Which obviously you go, well, then that's clearly going to take time. Sounds like it's going to take more time. But it's like in the training process, then eventually it should be able to go, that one, instead of, hang on, let me write these 5 lines. And you kind of see how that would go there, but from the perspective of supporting development as opposed to replacing it, which is like, if saying all this up front, you go, if you take that at face value, that's fine.
One of the things that's very interesting to me is that within the creative communities, a lot of this is treated very differently to how it is in the programming communities. Yeah. I can touch a little bit on a friend of mine, like being able to use ChatGPT in his workplace to create a lot of very powerful integrations and internal tools that have, are ultimately going to create a better workplace experience for the employees at that company, which, is kind of interesting. Hey, it's code. What do we all do when we have a problem? You go to Stack Overflow. That's how everyone gets through their university course. Anyway, so they say it's based off the needs of the staff, trained on internal work. There will be no final product without human input, and ultimately it is a tool and a pipeline to support development rather than a replacement. So basically the idea is like when there's a lot of stuff happening and, a pretty damn thick pipeline for making all these barks, something like this, they say, can be pretty damn effective. And overall, it does seem to be quite ethically produced in terms of like their policies regarding, scraping data. Now, the thing is, there has been some pushback. So let's get into that. The GDC talk was, barely engaged with. I think most people probably don't even know there was one. So to take a look here, somebody who actually attended the talk and works in games. So Liz here, my game dev mutuals, please, I love you, but don't love your immediate knee-jerk reactions to this. I attended the talk. It was fantastic. Gold standard of how to integrate this technology into your development in direct collaboration with writers and using their data sets. This is not, we will replace writers with this tech. This is, writers tell us what they, what they want with this tech. Reading your takes is exhausting. So Liz is a designer at Possibility Space, and ultimately it's like we've got to go to, I suppose in this case technically, because we can't access the primary source. Our only primary source to go off is the actual press release itself, but we can go to secondary sources who have attended the talk. Ultimately, so it comes down then to, let's think about it. What cost is being eliminated? What are the side effects? And to sort of dive into some of that, Alana Pierce, who you probably see on YouTube, she now works at Santa Monica Studios, who are the God of War people. As a writer, having to edit AI-generated scripts as dialogue sounds far more time-consuming than just writing my own 10 lines. I far prefer AAA studios use whatever budget to instead hire more writers. I would often take the view that more writers is not the solution. I generally think that the best work comes from the smallest team possible. but working efficiently with a very clear purpose. I think that's ultimately what puts most of the soul, in games. I mean, hey,
theoretically, of course.
Yeah, we'll all think of too many cooks. So for that, it depends. Like, firmly, it just depends on how good the tool is and how useful it is. In this case, you would very much hope that if this is being developed in collaboration with actual writers at Ubisoft, given that quite a few people at the talk have a very positive sentiment, you would then assume that this, broadly speaking, is a positive. And I suppose it's one of those things, you don't know what you don't know, right? And sometimes the demon box can surface an idea that you didn't think about because you didn't know to think about it. It's like one of the things that I found to be quite useful using ChatGPT to red team some of my own ideas is, I'll come up with an idea, right? I'll do like a little write-up for the idea, and then I'll just be like, I will just give the command with the GPT-4 that's, I think, quite a lot better than 3.5. I'll just be like, torpedo my idea. Find reasons why it's bad. What are the things that I haven't thought of? What are the things I haven't considered of? Because that's the case where it's like, well, I have my idea. Now I know that I want to torpedo my own idea. I want to find the cracks in it. I want to find the holes in it. But what if I'm sitting there, I'm trying to brainstorm these problems. I can't think of any problems. Well, can you use a tool like that as a assistant in order to maybe it's not the most specific or anything, but to find some problems, to find some holes in my thinking. Because otherwise I'd have to, realistically, I'd have to ping him in Slack.
Well, that's
and that would be kind of annoying because you're doing shit.
Yeah, well, that's the whole point. The whole point of this is basically, do you use this or do you hire more writers? And it's not hiring more writers at the unequal level. This would be hire junior. More or less, it'd be hire juniors to do these temperate lines, to do these barks. And in that process, then you get a different shot of creativity from someone else. I think that's basically the argument, where it's like ultimately just going to be cheaper in the long term because you pay it once. You pay them once to make it, and then you pay people to improve it, as opposed to hiring more people. It's a machine instead of a person. Yeah. That's fundamentally the difference here, where I could see working with a person's probably a little bit more natural, a little bit nicer in the long term. But I think
here's like, not pushback, but here's like another perspective. And certainly if you have any family who have maybe worked in, say, the social services, maybe they're a civil servant, I certainly do, or maybe if you work in a team that you feel is, or, an organization that's very big, it's like, as an example, if tools like this could allow, because, the idea of working in a 30, 40, or 50 person organization, I really like that. Too much more than that, and I know that's not going to suit me. I'm not going to like it. So it's like, if you can supercharge people, you can maybe make it so that a smaller team can get more done. And I wouldn't even necessarily mean that in a this is great because now we can do more with less to save costs. For me, it's like, I don't want to work in a massive team where you need managers for the sub team, and then managers for the managers, and then a product manager for not even the thing you're working on, but a project manager for the sub part of the product you're working on, who then works to a product manager who's above that. You know what I mean, right? So I then start to wonder what would this mean for team structure? Do you need to have less annoying meetings and less bloat, and you can maybe work in a smaller, more intimate, creative team than something that, by definition of its scale, ends up being, really, really humongous? Because you even think about Ubisoft games, and I'd say one of the things they've suffered from is their ability to just throw 1,500 people at an Assassin's Creed game. Because then it's there ends up being so much that it doesn't feel like there's a vision in the game anymore, to a degree, or just that it's we got 1,500 people, so no shit, it's full of side quests that make the game really hard to parse, versus something like a Ghost of Tsushima, where, big open world game, but a lot more thoughtful.
It's almost certainly a wide variety of things to talk about there, because that is that as a topic goes so deep. Because I could immediately just say, yeah, but what about all the good ideas that come from a junior? Because they're from outside that perspective, but they're not going to come from an AI, because that AI is trained on your own data set. And then you go, okay, well then you've got a whole lot of, I'd say there's big ifs in all direction. And I think it ultimately comes down to There are many positives, but there are also many negatives, and also loads of like weird side effects at the same time.
And this is what we can kind of go into a little bit here, as is pointed out by Susan.
Yeah.
Ardent, I think. Ardent. Part of the reason that juniors are often asked to do repetitive fundamental tasks is precisely because it teaches them the fundamentals. It's one of those things, you know, I have never liked the idea of how so many industries treat juniors as the like, all right, well, you know, you're a junior, you've got to pay your dues in Barkland, go do the Barks. I would far rather more of a mentor-mentee experience, more of a personalized experience than just being like, all right, because ultimately, like, we know the way that the games industry treats juniors is, you have a lot of repetitive shit to do, bucko.
Yeah, they're treated
and
as,
I don't think that's the best type of work.
treated as workhorses as opposed to people being actually like trained specifically. But I think fundamentally the loss of a junior would still result in, what's your pipeline to get into the industry now? Oh, you can never do something at a junior level because all the juniors have been replaced by AI because you don't have the time to do the simple job to get actually better at it. Especially because it comes down to the perspective of, oh yeah, you want to do something in AAA. Oh, well, you're not good enough to do something that's permanent, and we don't need an AI to do everything. So then there's no pathway into industry.
It's like,
unless you do your own stuff, maybe, but then you never have like that involves a substantial amount of risk if you're doing stuff by yourself, because you know how you're going to pay for that. Are you supposed to not have a job for so many years while you get to a senior level of skill and then you can get transplanted in the industry? Is one of the concerns.
This is when we get into a really profound macroeconomic thing. And I mean, ultimately, you know, for the Americans in the audience, grats, you know, often a lot of the times people clown in your country, now you can clown in our country. So one of the reasons like why the UK economy's really struggled is productivity hasn't increased. Like one of the more fundamental things is the UK's in a really big productivity slump. And I suppose I then wonder, it's like this sort of thing, you know, these sorts of tools being able to increase productivity, does that end up being, and, you know, there's obviously that bit of my head that's just like, oh, let's just have Star Trek be real, please.
See, that's the
which,
problem.
you know, is ultimately, I'm not.
It's not going to be like...
You immediately are like, nah, you know, if we got Star Trek and Blade Runner, we're probably not going in either direction, but I can feel the tug of the Blade Runner direction more than I can feel the tug of the Star Trek direction.
Frustrated that you left out the real answer, which is Mad Max, but go on.
Fair play. I suppose in a case like this, you know, I just don't think that going into the bark mines is, or, you know, that kind of dialogue, right?
Yeah.
I don't think that that's the best way to start off a junior. And I would imagine that because often it's very easy to think about the things that are being, you know, optimized, or like, you know, the productivity increases mean that a certain thing is not as needed anymore. I would like to think, though, that ultimately, like, we do live in a competitive economy, so there still is going to be a motive to, you know, to get more people. There still is going to be a motive. I think it's more that now a junior writer is actually significantly more capable, so that as a junior, they don't have to be consigned to the bark mines, that a junior could perhaps, you know, do more.
Yeah, but the problem fundamentally is that who's going to hire them to do more because they're a junior, because they don't have any proof of skill, they don't have any training, so you can't get them into...
How does somebody get any of that for just writing barks anyway?
It's because it's proximity, and it is a microcosm of what you're supposed to do. You are supposed to write in think of context, you are supposed to do all of that. It's not great, but it's better, and at least it ends up in, oh, I spent X time on this product, like, on this, I shipped a game. Whereas if you remove juniors from the equation entirely, in a perspective of they're needed for production, then they'll never be needed for production, they'll never be hired, and then they'll never get experience, and then there'll never be a new junior coming out of that out of that from an industry. I
guess I feel like that's fairly first order. Fairly first order thinking. And I feel like the concerns of that, you know, would at worst be transient. Because typically speaking, productivity increases have led to job creation. It's just... jobs and iterations of a role that haven't existed yet. I forget the number of, it's like the percentage of jobs that exist in our current economy versus that of like the 50s and 60s. And I think it's somewhere near like over 50% of job roles, just literally the titles didn't exist back then. So, I think that tomorrow's junior will probably be a more creative, capable, and effective person than today's junior. And ultimately, I think that's probably a good thing. I think it will require less management overhead. I think it will allow for teams to be more lean and collaborative. I mean, I'd even think, like, obviously for us as a narrative studio, like, word count is, we produce a lot of words. A junior in like this context, I would never even conceive of hiring. That's just not how you would make a great game.
I think it's interesting because it's like it implies that that's all they're doing is it's a complete box and they're not a human outside of that, and that's the only experience as opposed to having other things and that being like the point is not.
Some of the people doing Pushback, I'd say, are quite doing that themselves.
Oh yeah, I imagine this is the thing where it's like it's potential side effects overall. I think there's so much to consider, and that's I think ultimately one of the problems is that this is kind of kicking open Pandora's box.
Yeah, and
in a way
where you can reason all day, but video.
Yeah, you can reason all day either way.
Yeah,
and it's like which way is it going to go? God, I really hope you're right. Basically, I really hope you're right a lot of the time, but I think there's a little bit of just when people aren't entirely sure, and that's where the pushback comes from. It's from fear.
I saw a tweet and I thought it was fucking hilarious, right? Because the tweet was just saying, hey, have you compared the market cap of Paradox Interactive to Ubisoft? It's insane. Ubisoft's a lot bigger than Paradox. Why do they have like, why are their market caps like that? And it's just that idea of like, if your company is really bloated and inefficient and new disruptors are able to come in, it's like you deserve to be trounced. Like that's actually the point. And ultimately the ultimate battle royale of companies against other companies should be creating better products for consumers. And a lot of that has actually happened in the industry, as much as we may focus on the negative news. And certainly the companies who have been doing the worst things, like, say EA just deciding, let's pollute Anthem by turning it into a Destiny game. Like, very large punishment happened for that. A lot of these, even take a Diablo Immortal. Like, yeah, it exists in the hell that is mobile games. But core gamers were just like, no, we're not taking that. And while I am sure that exists in its own little place or whatever, it is culturally irrelevant. I can see these things being useful for sparking, some creativity. There's obviously pros and there's cons. And outside of the context of this, which of course is, I was talking about this specific tool as it's being presented. There's certainly other like ethical concerns and stuff. Like if you just have, like an art model and it's just decided to go to ArtStation and grab everyone's work into the fucking, humongous smart stock library, custom, make your asset whatever you want, Katamari, I have no mouth and I must scream, Rocco's basilisk demon friggin' machine. Really tried to lay it on thick there, didn't I?
A wee bit.
Then like there's issues. There's issues. But again, I'd think, so a good example, and I have not properly tested or looked into it or any of this, but you take Adobe Firefly, which is their like, broad Firefly. AIification of things. So content aware fill tool. You guys would be surprised how many artists use that, and it's often so good that you have no idea. Their newer, quite significantly smarter version of that, that could be powerful. And the thing is, in a way, some of this has been litigated before with photo bashing. And what the funny thing is, like photo bashing, a lot of the styles of art that a lot of, I suppose, your layperson who's not like super, I guess who's just like, hey, that looks cool, I like it, which I mean ultimately is the goal.
I would put an asterisk on that But I think that's a big thing of, does it look cool or does it have some sort of purpose or meaning? And those are very different.
Yeah, but photo bashing doesn't really take away from the purpose and meaning.
Yeah.
Like, there's a lot of photo bashing in the core concept art of so many of the games that you've played. The difference is that, actual production concept art is not really what you see as, like, the big things in an art book for a game. It's one of those things where the definition of that word's perhaps not ideal.
Yeah, it's not at all.
But anyway, the idea, if eventually, and I suppose an example of this is in the past, if you were, those like voice synthesis things, in the past, it took so much data to synthesize a voice. But newer models are able to synthesize a voice with a lot less sample audio, right?
11 Labs does it in I think they need less than 1 minute of talk.
Yeah.
And it's actually pretty good. You're like, oh, Jesus.
So that is basically what I think about as it pertains to some of the art stuff. I do not like the demon machine that has just taken ArtStation for its own. But I would certainly hope that as technology advances, an individual artist would be able to point a more sophisticated model at their own work. And much like how there are ethical considerations into how this Ubisoft thing works, I would like to think that there could be ethical considerations in how some of these tools work. I know that there are already startups who are working on this, where the specific selling point is like, no, this will be useful for your studio to make actual useful art based on you, the artist, and what you give it. In which case, with art, it's like you have to split that into so many dimensions, because there is the literal, Wacom labor that you do. And that is going to involve a set of mechanical and technical skills that you have developed in concert with your creative eye, your critical eye, your understanding of light and all of those things. I suppose, though, for an artist who maybe wants to do some quick ideation, maybe based on their past work or whatever, or maybe is like, they're reaching a block in something. Is it possible for them to reduce the labor component, but further focus in on the artistic component? Now, to be very clear, this is very different from a bunch of, people who 1 year ago or 5 months ago were just on an NFT grift, who, pretty much exist to turn everything into a quick money hustle. I mean, I'm sure you've seen all of the, make $37,000 a month using ChatGPT, fucking clickbait thumbnails that are all over YouTube, or the people who just try to make stickers. That's the example I go to, because it's just the perfect example of grift, where it's like, I have no art, I have no real thoughts other than, ooh, look cool, I am going to generate 1,000 vinyl stickers on, on Mid-Journey, and then I'm going to hook them up to a print-on-demand company, and then I'm going to make an Etsy store, and then I'm going to pretend that I'm an artist when in reality I am just, what was it, site parking? Remember people buy URLs and park stuff to get the advertisement revenue money 20 years ago, 15 years ago?
There was a term for that. I can't remember it anymore.
Forgotten what it was. Yeah. But it was one of those funny, this is a no value added grift.
Yeah.
So it's that sort of thing where it's really frustrating, where it's do we need a Spider-Man mask? With great power comes great responsibility. The Spider-Man. Some of these tools are really useful and can be harnessed by very talented people to do cool things. And they won't be terrible grifters about it.
Yeah.
And then there'll be legions of grifters who just come in and fucking ruin it for everyone.
Yeah, and I think that's where most of the all the pushback here immediately began, because it was, of course, because Ubisoft are grifters. They're going to be the grifters. The person who made this, Ben Swanson, and the Ubisoft Forge people, probably not grifters. Most of the writers at Ubisoft, probably not grifters. But the people in charge at Ubisoft, definitely in some capacity there's grifters in that chain somewhere. You can tell from their output, and you can just know, can they be trusted to not grift? Can they be trusted to go, how will this be used artistically and for in creative endeavors? How is it going to improve our video games experience so that there's more meaning to them, people will enjoy them more, it's better. And how much will it be? How much can we do this and not have to pay people and also make loads more money? How much is that? Because I think one of the most fun, ethical concerns around this tool, even when it's the individualized data and specific data, because obviously grabbing wide data sets could just be considered plagiarism because, of course, obviously, but that's how you get inspired as a person. Yes and no, it's sort of different.
The dose makes the poison.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it's exactly that.
I would very much hope that that bit comes from somebody being able to engage with the tool using their creative understanding from witnessing other art, not that the art is sitting there doing the ganking.
Yeah, so I think one of the things that's fun to think about is, you're a lead writer at Ubisoft. You're one of the best they ever had, and they use Ghostwriter for weeks, for months, for years even, and you've absolutely got down Assassin's Creed box perfectly. And you've done enough different settings that it can kind of adapt them based on history, because it it learns your process and kind of does it in a bit. And it also learns how you theme stuff appropriately for that setting, how you grab themes from mythology of the era and put it in. And then you're like, you know what? I feel like a change of position. I've been headhunted by someone with more money that wants to pay me more, or I'm going to retire, or I'm going to take a sabbatical from video games for a while. And then Ubisoft just go, yeah, but we've still got you. You're just trapped inside the daemon box. I think that's one of the fun things is this would need to be, as part of the ethical concern, this needs to be, this model's trained on your data. We have a button that says we don't have access to your data anymore, as opposed to signing away your rights to everything.
Their data.
Yeah,
because ultimately the work that you number one of any employment contract in any of these industries, and what is understood by everyone working in these industries is well, no, you're writing for the company. The company owns that.
Yeah,
the problem that people have, of course, is if a company then says, and by the way, we own the code you have at home, or we have first right of refusal to your side hustles, or anything else that you do.
Yeah.
That's the problem bit.
Yeah, no, you're completely right. But that needs a change for this new era, because if you have access to their data, they can just emulate you in a way that's now more literal than before. Whereas before it's we have access to all this, so if we have another writer to take on Assassin's Creed and do it, obviously it's going to be using your work as a baseline, but that's fine, that's accepted. But it's when you go away, we don't need you anymore theoretically, because we can just we have a version of you inside the box that does what you do. And it's you're kind of almost signing away perpetuity of your writing by giving them your data in that weird sense. It's you can imagine a more advanced AI version of this, which is almost certainly going to exist at some point. You can see that happening. You go, okay, well, I'm going to move somewhere else, but there's now two of me. Oh, and I'm not getting paid for all this stuff. Oh no, you can kind of imagine that.
An example of this, I don't want to say already happens literally like this, but coders.
Yeah.
Who, if they write things, they leave the company, the code they wrote is still deployed, production, used, things are built off it, and the code is generating lifetime value beyond your employment contract that you're uncompensated for.
Yeah.
But perhaps the difference there is that programmers are way better compensated than writers.
And they also, the difference is fundamentally, it's less about the value, it's less about life stuff. It's more about there is a copy of you. Because it's not about the fundamentals of obviously someone else could emulate your style could be emulated, what if you remaster a game and you don't get residuals? That's a different category conceptually to there is a ghost in the shell. There is a version of, an emulator for how you write and your brain in the box that they own now. So they own a shade of what you've left behind in a conceptual way that feels more dystopian to people. I think
in a profoundly stronger way than the next generation of writers referencing your work in a sequel.
Exactly.
Because that's the natural way ran in human software and human hardware. Your brain and how you think and what you've learned.
Yeah, we're starting to hit levels of consideration that are really not nice.
Yeah, because it's an AI. I keep on the phrase "the dose makes the poison" just appears in my head all the time, and it's the thing that makes our species incredible versus a lot of other, I mean, there's so many other species on this planet that are incredible, obviously. But specifically our species is more software than hardware. And, you know, the hardware that we have, like our hands, is it's very multi-purpose. It's very adaptable. So the strength that humans have had, you know, it really is in software using limited hardware. Because there's other, you know, there are other species on this planet that can, you know, they're stronger, they run further. Man, look, even take like some of the great apes, you should see their body fat percentage and how goddamn shredded they are. But the thing that makes the humans really strong is like, the software bit.
Consciousness, yeah.
And now the thing that is happening though, that is, I mean, it really cuts to the very, you know, the things underpinning all worries here. Not all worries, but I think the most fundamental worry is now, you know, we would make software to leverage how we're not really good at compute. You know, you give a human, just tell a human, could you do 85 factorial, please? Human just goes,
Yeah, let me bust out the calculator, no worries.
Yeah,
I get this for you.
Let me get a few thousand abacuses at the ready here.
Yeah.
But the point is, the human knows that the human wants to do 85 factorial and can use the compute of a computer to do it.
Makes a tool, yeah.
But now what's happening is, in a way, there's a supplanting there. And that's why a lot of these things right now are being described as a co-pilot. GitHub Copilot being described as a pair programmer right in your IDE because, and I'm not saying that these things are human, obviously.
No, we don't even know what constitutes a human scientifically.
Yeah.
But it's going from like 1% of human emulation to 2% of human emulation to 5% of human emulation in terms of how neurons are linked together and how our software works. And people are going, oh shit.
But then backed up by the humongous compute advantage.
Yeah.
Because a human can say, could you extract 5 seconds of video, please? Now, don't be sending a human in to fucking go trawl through those bits and extract that footage manually. We don't have the compute for that.
Yeah, we could do it if it was on a film reel with a pair of scissors, but yeah.
Yeah. So I guess that's like now the thing where the dose makes the poison, and the dose is increasing, and it's supercharged by all the advantages that the current sort of transistor-based computer has over our big fleshy neuron-based computer. And I suppose that's the most fundamental thing. Like at the very least, I like how it always does bring us to this sort of conversation. And it's weird. The good thing is it's a fun conversation, and it's the sort of conversation that at one time was limited to artificial intelligence. Of course, there was once limited to the science fiction genre. Now, the bad thing is that a lot of those science fiction movies were also warnings.
Yeah, so that's why I completely think this is extremely cool and very useful in all these circumstances. But I'm also just like, we are like, if I follow the trend line, it's just a dystopia is coming at a fucking absolutely breakneck pace.
Yeah, but then the thing is, like, think of applying some of these models to drug discovery. Remember
the Wall-E future, fantastic.
Remember Floating at Home?
Yeah, Folding at Home.
Folding at Home, that was the protein folding. You then think about, say, a lot of the AI models that are being applied to cancer diagnostics. That, it's just at the stage, like, we've developed a tool that is more effective at working out if this is a cancer or not than the human, and this produces a better health outcome. And it's like, if that's good, then, that's more efficient for healthcare. Maybe that makes advanced healthcare more accessible to more people, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Because ultimately, there's always the thought, and it's the ghastly bit of like, all the medical innovations will be reserved for the rich only. But then you think about, say,
which they will, for sure, but yeah.
In one way, but then the ones that confer cost savings and accuracy increases, those are the things where there is an economic incentive to deploy them at scale. A really good example would be the pill colonoscopies, where basically Imagine a turbo GoPro and a pill, and people they do all the normal prep and stuff. Just that instead of a surgeon jangling around your pipes, you swallow a pill, and the pill comes out the other end, or even syncs up wirelessly to a little thing, and then suddenly the same hospital is able to perform so many more colonoscopies. And I mean, even a recent headline from our country is one of our hospitals has actually made the call out to Cuba to send more doctors in because they're completely overwhelmed. Like red flag surgeries are like totally missing their their target dates and stuff like that. So I guess the reason I bring up say like the pill colonoscopy thing, or some of the AI that's been able to be deployed in like medical diagnostics, because we're talking about this with like video games and creativity. Yeah, there is like another side to it too that solves other forms of human problems, or even just you see the amount of people who die on the road, and it's really horrific. And it's like, well, if a car has an automated safety system and you can just slice the death rate per mile driven, down to 10% of what it was 30 years ago, holy shit.
Yeah, it's like no one would argue against that. There's so many incredible improvements to be there. It's just everyone's still also going, oh yeah, I've read science fiction books. That's all going to be very good and very nice, but there's also going to be massive repercussions that we're not really equipped to deal with, because human evolution is not happening because humans are biological. But computer evolution's happening way faster, and it's like, well, I've seen all forms of fiction that's looking more and more shockingly prescient. Yeah. Like all of those worlds have incredible advantages to it too. It's just that there are also downsides. It's very difficult to get a line where you look at both and go, what do we do about any of this? And the answer is nothing, because it's just going to barrel ahead, because progress is progress at the end of the day, and there's nothing that's going to stop it except economic incentives changing, which won't change because economic incentives are how things work. So it'll just be progress for the sake of progress and for the sake of grift, and then we all explode and die when the sun goes out. Fantastic. I'm not actually that much of a doomer about it. It is just like things are going to change very, 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 very fast.
The sun won't go because it's expended all of its hydrogen. It'll go because somebody tried a really sketchy grift.
You know what? Yeah, it's like, right, what can we get this to? Oh, I just turned off the sun. Whoops, sorry about that, everyone. Oh dear, wouldn't surprise me.
So, look, it's one of those things. I feel like if we covered today's story in a very short format without having the proper discussion, because I know that's one of the longer videos we put out recently, I just feel like, we'd be very limited and specific talking only about this in games, but I think, like, broadly, it is part of a wider cultural, technological wave that has got to be engaged with.
It's the internet on crack.
In a more wide manner. So I suppose I'd just say, let us know, like, how's this impacted you in your industry? What do you think about it? Are there any sorts of menial tasks in your life? Maybe just a bunch of data entry that it's like, oh, it sucks, but you have to do it. What are the things that if you kind of could have that, like, co-pilot, what are the sorts of things you would want that co-pilot to do? It's like, out of what you do, what's the stuff that like gives you energy and is exciting versus saps your energy and sucks? So I guess, I think it's got to be a dialogue. So let us know. Till then, I guess we'll see what Ubisoft does. If the barks all get worse in their games, maybe we'll know why.
That's where there's a little bit of like, obviously this is great, and the tools from a great standpoint, and the ethical concerns in the short term are all addressed and stuff. And you go, that's fantastic. But this is Ubisoft. They are cursed. Something will happen and the barks will all be complete gibberish, or what'll happen is this will take like writers a couple of weeks or months to get used to using. Someone at the top will say, why is our game not ready? And someone will say, to be quite honest with you, it's because there's an adaptation time from writers for all of the AI tools we're using. And then that person will go, well, then cancel it, just make it normally. And then somehow it'll end up being worse, taking longer. And then everyone will look and go, AI is kind of shit, what the hell? And then we'll all be saved. Ubisoft will save the world by accidentally going, Whoops, we've done this great thing and somehow messed it up.
Nothing I want more than another Ubisoft original. Oh, that shocker.
Yep.
Goodbye.